So, hello and welcome back yet again to a new book. And you guys have spoken, and this time around we are reading Heidi, which is a book by Johanna Spyri that was written in 1880. This is definitely, I guess, a classic. I guess you would call it a classic. And I did a little bit of background reading, and it was written by Johanna. I think it's just Joanna, but it has an H. So, Johanna Spyri, who was a Swiss author, mostly of children's stories back in the 1800s. So, should be interesting. Not gonna lie, I was pulling a little bit more for Bruce to win, because dogs, but this should be kind of fun. I'm probably going to butcher all of the Swiss names. Just going to get that out into the public right now. Probably going to butcher a lot of the Swiss names, especially the place names. It's those two little dots over things that always gets to me. But that is what we are going to be doing. And again, a chapter a day. I did also find out this is technically two books because it was written in two parts, but it's usually put into one book, which is how I got it. And it's illustrated, so we're going to have pictures to look at. So, without too much further ado, let's jump in and read Heidi by Johanna Spyri with Chapter 1, Part 1, The Alm Uncle. From the pleasantly situated old town of Mayfield, a footpath leads up through shady green meadows to the foot of the mountains. Anyone who follows it will soon catch the pungent fragrance of grassy pasture lands, for the footpath goes straight and steep into the Alps. On one bright, sunny June morning, a tall, sturdy-looking girl, evidently a native of the mountains, was climbing this narrow path. She led by the hand a little girl whose cheeks glowed as if they were aflamed. And who's to wonder why? In spite of the hot June sun, the child was bundled up as if for protection against the keenest cold. She could not have been 5 years old, but it was impossible to tell anything about her natural figure, for she wore two or three dresses, one over the other, and a big red cotton kerchief around her neck. Her feet seemed lost in heavy hobnailed shoes as she made her hot and laborious way up the mountain. At the end of an hour of steady climbing, the two girls came to the hamlet that lies halfway up the Alm and is called Imdorfi, or the little village. Here they were greeted by nearly everyone they met, for the older girl had reached her childhood home. However, she did not pause, but she hurried on, answering all questions and returning greetings as she went. As she was passing the last of the scattered cottages, a voice from the doorway cried, "Wait a moment, Deet. I'll go with you if you're bound up the mountain." The tall girl immediately stopped, and the child pulled her hand out of hers and sat upon the ground. "Are you tired, Heidi?" said her companion. "No, I'm hot," said the little girl. "We're almost there now," her companion said encouragingly. Just then a large, pleasant-looking woman came out of the cottage. The little girl jumped to her feet and followed the two women up the mountain. "Really, Dita, where are you taking the child?" said the newcomer. "It is your sister's little girl, isn't it? The orphan?" "Yes, it is," said the other. "I'm taking her to her grandfather. She will have to stay there." "What? The little girl is going to live with the Alm Uncle? You must have lost your senses, Dita. The old man will send you back with such a scheme as that." "He can't. He's her grandfather, and it is time for him to look out for her. I've had her until now, Barbel, but I have a good position offered to me in Frankfurt. I can't take the child, and her grandfather must do his part. That would be very well if he were like other men, said the portly Barbel with indignation. But you know what he is. He will have nothing to do with the living soul. He never sets foot in church. And if once in a 12-month he comes down with his thick staff, everyone keeps out of his way and is afraid of him. What will he do with a child, especially such a young one? None the less, said Dita stubbornly. He's her grandfather, and it is his business to look after her. He won't do her any harm. If he does, he will have to answer for it, not me. I should like to know, said Barbel, what the old man has on his conscience that makes him look so fierce and live all alone up there on the Alm and keep almost hidden from sight. Of course you know something about it, Dita. Your sister must have told you, right? Of course she did, but I hold my tongue. If he heard about it, I would suffer. Barbel had long desired to know the real cause of the Alm Uncle's peculiarities, but she had only recently married into the village. Before that, her home had been down in the valley at Prattigau. Her friend Dita, on the contrary, had lived in Dorfli until a year ago. Then her mother had died, and she had gone down to Ratgaz, where the baths are, and found a position as a chambermaid in a hotel. Dita had come from Ragaz that very morning with the little girl, having had the luck to ride as far as Mayfield on a hay wagon with an acquaintance who was driving home. Barbel thought, this was a good chance to find out something. She seized Dita's arm and said, one can learn the real truth from you, instead of gossip which is talked. Has he always been so feared? Has he always been such a hermit? I can't tell whether he's always been that way or not. I'm 26 now, and he is at least 70, and of course I never saw him when I was young. If I were certain that he would never again be seen in Prattigau, I might tell you all sorts of things about him. My mother was from Dorschleg, and so was he. There now, Dita, what do you mean? Said Barbel. You need not be so severe in our gossip in Prattigau. Besides, I can keep a secret. Tell me, you won't regret it. Fine, I will. But mind you, hold your tongue, said Dita. She looked around to see if Heidi was close enough to hear, but the child was nowhere to be seen. She must have ceased following them a while back, but in their conversation they had not noticed. There she is, said Barbel, pointing to a place quite far away. She is climbing up the cliffs with the goat-herd Peter and his goats. Why is he so late today with his animals? Oh well, it's just as well. He can look after the child, and you will be able to talk with me. Peter needn't trouble himself to look after her, said Dita. She is not dull for a 5-year-old. She keeps her eyes open, and it's a good thing for her that she does. This old man has nothing to leave her but his 2 goats and a mountain hut. And did he once have more? Said Barbel. Him? Well, I should say that he did once have more, said Dita. He used to have the finest farm in Domschleg, but he drank and gambled away the whole property. His father and mother died, first one, then the other, from sheer grief. Then he disappeared, leaving nothing behind him but a bad name. It's reported that he had gone off with the soldiers to Naples, and nothing else was heard of him for 12 or 15 years. Then suddenly he appeared again in Domschleg with a half-grown boy. Every door was closed to him, and this made him very bitter. He said he would never set foot in Domschleg again, and he came here to Dorfli. He had married while he was away, but his wife had died, so he and his son were all alone. He must have had some money still, for he let his son Tobias learn the carpenter's trade. Tobias was a steady fellow, and he was well thought of in Dorfli. But no one had confidence in the old man. It was said that he had gotten into trouble in Naples, that he had killed someone in a quarrel. But we recognized the relationship, for my mother's grandmother was his grandmother's first cousin, so we call him Uncle. And as we are related to almost everyone in Dorfli on my father's side, they all call him Uncle. Ever since he went up on the Alm, he's been known as the Alm Uncle. But what became of Tobias? Said Barbel. I think it might be raining. He married my sister, Adelheid, said Dita. They were very happy together, but it didn't last. 2 years later, while Tobias was working on a house, a beam fell on him and killed him. Adelheid's grief threw her into a violent fever, and she didn't recover. She was never very strong, and was often in such a condition that it was almost impossible to even tell if she was asleep or awake. Only 2 weeks after Tobias died, Adelheid also was buried. People said it was a judgment on the uncle for his godless life. It was even said so to his face, and that just made him more surly than ever. He no longer spoke to anyone, and everybody avoided him. And then suddenly it was reported he had gone up on the Alm, and he's lived there ever since. My mother and I took in Adelheid's little child. She was 1. Last summer, my mother died, and since I wanted to work down at the baths, I took her to board with old Ursel up in Faserdorf. I stayed at the baths all winter, but now the lady that I work for wants to take me home with her to Frankfurt. We leave the day after tomorrow. It's a good job, I tell you. And you are going to give the child to the old man up there? I'm surprised that you would think of such a thing, Dita, said Barbel. I've done my duty, said Dita. I can't take a 5-year-old child to Frankfurt. Now, where are you going, Barbel? We're halfway up the mountain now. I've reached where I was going. I want to speak to old Goatherd Peter's wife. She does spinning for me in the winter, so goodbye, Dita. Good luck. Dita shook her companion's hand and stood still while Barbel went into the dilapidated little dark brown mountain hut in a hollow where it was a bit sheltered from the wind. Here lived the Goatherd Peter, an 11-year-old boy who every morning went down to Dorfli to get the goats and drive them up the mountain so they could eat until evening on the short herbs. Then Peter would hurry down again with the light-footed animals, give a whistle through his fingers as he reached Dorfli, and all of the owners would immediately come get their goats. Little boys and girls for the most part, for the creatures were peaceful and harmless. All through the summer, it was the only time that Peter saw his fellow beings. The rest of the year he lived alone with his goats. To be sure, he had his mother and a blind grandmother at home, but he had to leave very early every morning and come back from Dorfli late in the evening. So, in order to play with other children as long as possible, he spent only enough time at home to eat his bread and milk. His father, who had also been called Peter the Goatherd because he had followed the same calling, had met with an accident a few years ago while felling trees. His mother, whose real name was Brigitta, was still called Goatherd Peter's wife, and the blind grandmother was known by old and young simply by the name grandmother. Dita looked around for the children with the goats, but they were nowhere in sight. She climbed a bit higher, where she could have a better view of the mountain down the foothills. She looked first this way, and then, growing more and more impatient when she could not see them, the other. Meanwhile, the children were coming by a roundabout way. Peter knew many spots where there were good shrubs and bushes for his goats to eat, so he frequently wandered away from the path with his flock. At first, Heidi, in her heavy clothing, climbed after them, panting with heat and discomfort. She looked up at Peter, who jumped around without any difficulty in his bare feet and light pants, and then she looked at the goats with their small, slender legs climbing even more easily over the stones and crags. Suddenly she sat down on the ground and pulled off her shoes and stockings. Then she stood up and took off her thick red neckerchief, unfastened her Sunday frock, quickly took that off, and began unhooking her everyday dress. This one she had worn under the other to save her Aunt Dita the trouble of carrying it. Quick as lightning came off also the everyday frock, and there she stood in her light underclothing, stretching her bare arms out of her short chemise. She laid her clothes in a neat little pile on the ground and hurried up the mountain, now climbing and jumping after the goats as easily as Peter. When she came running after him in her new costume, he smiled. He looked back and saw the little pile of clothing, and he grinned still broader. Heidi, feeling light and free, began to talk. She had all sorts of questions to ask. How many goats did he have? Where was he going with them? What would he do when he got there? Finally, the children and the goats approached the hut and finally were in sight of Aunt Dita. Heidi, she screamed, what have you been doing? What is the matter with you? Where are your dresses and your neckerchief? Where are your brand new shoes and stockings I made you? The child calmly pointed down the mountain and said, Over there. The aunt followed the direction of her finger. You careless girl, she said. Why did you take everything off? I didn't need them, said Heidi, not looking in the least bit sorry for what she had done. Oh, you careless, senseless Heidi, said Dita, lamenting and scolding. It will take half an hour for anyone to go back down there again. Peter, run back and get the things. Be quick. Don't stand there staring at me as if you were nailed to the spot. I'm already late, said Peter. Dita just looked. Come here. Do you see this? She held up a 5-centime piece, which glistened in the light. Peter looked at it. Then suddenly he turned and raced down the mountain, not stopping until he reached the pile of clothes. He picked them up and he brought them back so quickly that Dita gave him his money with no delay. Peter put it in his pocket and his face lit with a broad smile, for such treasure did not fall often on him. You may carry the things up to the uncle's as long as you're going that way, said Aunt Dita, while she set about climbing the steep cliff which rose behind Peter's hut. The boy willingly undertook this task, and he followed, carrying the bundle in his left hand and swinging his stick in his right, with Heidi and the goats skipping and jumping merrily by his side. In about 3/4 of an hour, the little procession reached the height where, out on a jutting cliff, stood the old uncle's hut with a view of the valley below. Behind the hut stood 3 ancient fir trees with long, thick, untrimmed branches, and farther back the mountain rose even higher with its lovely fertile pastures surmounted with bare, steep cliffs. The uncle had made himself a seat by the side of the hut looking down into the valley. There he sat with his pipe in his mouth, his hands on his knees, calmly watching the children, Aunt Dita, and the goats. Aunt Dita had gradually been left behind, and Heidi was the first to reach the hut. She went straight to the old man and held her hand out. How do you do, grandfather? She said. Well, well, what does this mean? Said the old man roughly, giving her a long, penetrating look out from under his bushy eyebrows. Heidi looked back at him in surprise. She had never seen anyone like her grandfather, with his long beard and his heavy gray eyebrows that met in the middle of his forehead like a thicket. In the meantime, Dita had arrived with Peter, who waited expectantly to see what was going to happen. "I wish you good morning, Uncle," said Dita. "I have brought Tobias and Adelheide's child to you. You will hardly know her. You haven't seen her since she was a year old." "And what does the child do here with me?" said the old man. Then he turned and looked at Peter. "You there, get along with your goats. You're none too early. Take mine as well." Peter obeyed without delay, and he disappeared, for the uncle had made it plain he was not wanted. "Heidi must stay with you, Uncle," said Dita. "I'm sure I have done my duty by her these past 4 years, and now it is your turn to do what you can." "Indeed," said the old man with flashing eyes. "Suppose the child begins to fret and whine for you. What should I do with her then?" "That's your business," said Dita. "I'm sure no one told me what to do with the little one when she was given into my hands at only a year old, and I already had enough to do looking after myself and my mother. Now I have to look out for me, and you are next of kin to the child. If you can't have her, do what you will with her. You will have to answer for her if she comes to any harm. You don't want anything else being held against you, do you?" And we have a picture. Dita's conscience was not quite easy, and so she became very excited and had said more than she intended. Alm Uncle rose at her last words, and he gave her such a look that she stepped back a little bit. Then he stretched out his arm and said, "Get you gone down where you came from, and don't show yourself around here again very soon." Dita did not need to be told that twice. "Goodbye, then. And goodbye to you too, Heidi," she said quickly, and she hurried down the mountain to Dorfli. She was disgusted when almost everyone that she met stopped to ask about the child. "What? You left her with Alm Uncle? How could you do that, the poor little thing?" were the exclamations she heard all around. Dita pushed on as fast as she could go, and she was glad to leave the village behind her. She did not feel quite easy in her own conscience, for the dying mother had given the child to her. But she quieted her misgivings by telling herself that she would soon be earning a whole lot of money, and then she could do something again for Heidi. And that is the end of chapter 1, where I must say I don't know that I think too highly of Aunt Dita, but then again, not my circumstances. This is the illustration that we missed because I didn't show it for the very beginning. I like how, at least in the movies, at least the only movies of Heidi that I know of, Heidi was played by Shirley Temple, who is very, very blonde, but in every illustration in this book, she is very dark-haired. I find that interesting. Anyway, that was pretty good. That was pretty interesting. And she didn't sing Good Ship Lollipop or anything that I associate with Shirley Temple, so thumbs up for that. Also, I wonder if maybe the old man just kind of likes to hang out by himself. I get that, but back in the 1800s, that would definitely make you strange, especially the whole, he doesn't go to church. I don't think that's an issue, but that's a me thing. Anyway, thank you guys so much for voting for this book, and I hope that you are looking forward to hearing it as much as me. I also hope I did not completely butcher too many names. I think It's Adelheid because there's not an I at the end of it for Heidi's mother, although that is where her name came from because it's Adelheid and Heidi. And the place names, I'm going to do my best. But thank you as always for listening. Please do hit the thumbs up on your way out. It does always make me smile. Leave a comment if you want. Supposedly that helps engagement, and I like responding to them. So I will see you tomorrow.